Shalom Aleichem, everybody. It is Motzei Shabbos, Parshas Chazon. We're 2.5 days before Tisha B'Av, and I always like to share a message before Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, for many, myself included, the 9 days, Shavua Shechal, the 3 weeks, sometimes it's very difficult to connect to. We live, Baruch Hashem, in a certain sense of freedom. We don't have that sense of churban, what it's all about, and therefore a little bit of chizuk in terms of connecting to Tisha B'Av that is about to come upon us. In fact, there's a very difficult question that my Rebbe Rav Satz quotes over in the name of his Rebbe Rav Soloveitchik, in terms of how do we go ahead and relate when we think about Tisha B'Av. So we're building up, and then the night of Tisha B'Av is very intense. Eicha, the morning is very intense. We spend the entire morning sitting on low chairs, kinos. We don't wear tefillin. It's intense. It's very intense. And as the day progresses, the intensity wanes a little bit. In the afternoon, mincha time, we put on tefillin. We no longer, the minhag is now to sit on chairs once again. The lights in the shul are no longer dimmed. And the avelus recedes. We shift from the intensity of Tisha B'Av, and the afternoon is more of a regular day of tainus. Why is that? In fact, it's somewhat ironic because the Gemara tells us that the actual Beis HaMikdash was lit at the end of the day on Tisha B'Av and continued burning and was really destroyed all day on Yud Av. In fact, Yushalmi, Maseches Tainus, records the sheet of Rabbi Abin. Rabbi Abin used to fast for 2 entire days. He fasted on the 9th and the 10th of Av, because indeed the 10th of Av was when the Beis HaMikdash was actually burned down. And similarly, Tosas in Megillah, Daf Hamid Beis tells us that according to Yehuda Hanasi, the real day to commemorate the destruction of Beis HaMikdash is not Tisha B'Av, but rather Yud B'Av, the day after. And therefore it's somewhat unusual, somewhat difficult that we receive the Avelus. We lessen the Avelus as the day continues, when in fact it seems like the Avelus should be much more intense. What exactly is this all about? So Soloveitchik cited a well-known medrash in Medrash Tehillim, which is actually quoted in Tosas and in Rashi in Maseches Kiddushin Lamed Amud Beis. The Medrash tells us, this is Kapitel Ayin Tes, Mizmor LaAsaf, a song of Asaf that discusses the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. So Tosas asks, the Medrash asks, what do you mean Mizmor LaAsaf? Why should it say Mizmor LaAsaf? The exact text, Mizmor LaAsaf, Elokim Ba'u Goyim B'Nachal Secha. The Goyim came into your Nachal, into your Beis HaMikdash, they destroyed it, a song of Asaf. The Medrash asks, Mizmor LaAsaf, a song? What do you mean a song? It should be a kina LaAsaf. It should be a lamentation of Asaf, not a Mizmor LaAsaf. Why does it say a song of Asaf? And the Medrash answers as follows. The Medrash says that Asaf was Doresh as follows, is that Shira al Shekila HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chamaso al Ha'etzim v'al Abanim shel Beiso mitol kach hoter pleta miYisrael shel mole kach lo nishtayer misoni Yisrael sari to poet. Says the Medrash that Hashem was angry at the Jewish people, and he had a choice in front of him, either to take out his anger on the Beis HaMikdash and destroy his home, his temple, or to take his anger out on the Jewish people themselves. And Hashem Kala Chamaso, his anger was quenched, if you will, on the Eitzim V'Abanim Beis HaMikdash, and not on the flesh and blood of the Jewish people. And that is what enabled the Jewish people to continue on, to survive. Had Hashem took his anger where it was really placed, on the Sinas Chinam, on the Gimel Averos Chamuros that were perpetuated by the Jewish people, there would not have been any remnant of Klal Yisrael whatsoever. And therefore, by shifting his anger from Klal Yisrael itself and allowing it to play out on the Eitzim V'Avanim, that's what enables Klal Yisrael to survive. So therefore, David HaMelech, when he is lamenting Mizmor LaAsaf in Tehillim, it's a Mizmor. Why is it a Mizmor? Because there is a silver lining. There is something that we can look at as a Nechama. Hashem wanted to take his anger out on his people, and that would have been the utter destruction. But you know what? He didn't do so. He went ahead and took his anger out on Eitzim V'Avanim, which actually indicates his love of his people. That no matter how bad we become, he always wants to go ahead and enable us to survive, enable us to overcome, enable us to be better. And there's a certain nechama that exists in Tisha B'Av itself, that Kala Chamaso al Eitzim V'Avanim, and not on Klal Yisrael themselves. Says Rav Soloveitchik, that's perhaps the pshat. As we go ahead and experience the Tisha B'Av day, so indeed, in the morning, when we were up against the Romans, up against the Goyim, the Babylonians, in the morning time, we didn't know if we were going to survive. And then once we saw that, yes, and I put this in quotation marks, it was only the Beis HaMikdash. It was only the Beis HaMikdash. It was not the survival of the Jewish people themselves. So there was a certain sense of relief, a certain sense of nechama. Hence, in the morning, things were very, very precarious. As the day progresses and we see that it's only the Beis HaMikdash, so there's a certain sense of nechama and a lessening of the Avelis. Yes, indeed, we commemorate Tisha B'Av and not Yud B'Av, because there's a certain nechama, there's a certain, if you will, latent, minimal, but there, nechama comforting that Hashem spared us and took out his anger on the Eitzin B'Avonim. And that's the nechama of Tisha B'Av, and that's why the Avelis perhaps lessens, says Rav Soloveitchik, as the day progresses. Just a mashal l'maha davar domeh. It's not a true story, it's actually against the halacha, but it's a mashal to perhaps illustrate the point. The story is told of a couple that got married with tremendous anticipation of building a beautiful family, a beautiful life together. And indeed, they tried to have children year after year after year. Alas, to no success. The husband, wife, frustration sets in, no children. They daven, they try this treatment, that treatment. Nothing works. And finally, after years upon years of trying, finally their tefillos are answered. And the mother becomes pregnant. And she goes through her 6, 7, 8 months of pregnancy, and then she realizes there's something very wrong. There's something very wrong with this pregnancy, and the doctors tell her, as she goes into labor, that this is not going to be easy at all. And in fact, there's a very, very strong possibility that she won't be able to survive the labor. And either they can save the fetus, the child, the infant, or they can save the mother, but they're not going to be able to achieve both, one or the other. The mother confers with her husband and says, we've been trying so many years to have this child. I could not continue living without knowing that it was me over this child, and I want to go ahead and make sure that this child gets born into the world. Now again, against the halacha, but that's what the couple in this mashal decides to do. And indeed, the child is born and the mother perishes. Let's flash forward 13 years. 13 years later, it's the boy's bar mitzvah. The first time he's putting on tefillin and talis as a bar chiyuva. And on that very day, it's also his mother's 13th yortzeit. And the father says to his child, to his 13-year-old, his bar mitzvah boy, this is the first time that you can go ahead and say Kaddish at your mother's grave as a bar chiyuva. Let us go to the burial, to the gravesite, and say Kaddish by your mother's kever. They proceed to do so, and he's opening up the city. He's about to start to say the Kaddish. He's getting to the words, and there's a bird fluttering in the trees above him, and the child looks up, gets distracted by the bird, and loses his place. Finally, his father gets him back on track, and once again continues with the Kaddish. Another paragraph, another few words in, and there's a noise in the distance, a train in the distance, and once again the child looks up, gets distracted, and finally the father has to focus him once again on finishing the Kaddish. After it's all over, the father says to the child, my son, why were you so easily distracted? Why was it so difficult for you to get through the Kaddish? After all, this is the first time you're a bar mitzvah boy saying Kaddish for your mother. Why was it so difficult? Why were you so easily distracted? So the child answers back to his father and says, Abba, it's true. I'm saying Kaddish for my mother for the first time. But let's be honest. I never met my mother. I never saw my mother. She never did anything for me. She never acted as my mother. She never served as my mother. So to be honest, I don't really connect to the loss of my mother because I never had my mother. And therefore, that's why I was getting so distracted. The father says to his son, listen, you're right. You never saw your mother. She never acted, did anything for you that you saw as a mother normally does. She never made your bed, she never prepared your breakfast, she never tucked you in at night. However, realize and understand very well that if it wasn't for your mother, you wouldn't be here today. Your mother made the ultimate sacrifice so you could live, so you could experience, so you could have. So true, You didn't experience your mother on a day-to-day level, but your mother made the ultimate sacrifice that you can be here today and you can continue living in the way that you're living. That's a mashal. Because for many of us, we never experienced the Beis HaMikdash. We never experienced Karbanos. We never experienced Aliyah L'Regel. We never really understood. We don't understand what exactly life with Shechina, with the Beis HaMikdash, with Yushalayim HaBenuya is really all about. We're that child. And therefore, we don't really understand. So when we go ahead and sit down to mourn the loss of Beis HaMikdash, we plaintively say to Ribono Shalom, to our Father in heaven, Abba, we don't know what a Beis HaMikdash is. So yes, we get easily distracted. We can't get through kinos. We're waiting till we can go back into those pools and go back to that meat. We're so easily distracted because we don't understand what we've lost. We don't understand what our mother is. We don't understand what Beis HaMikdash is. Well, comes along the Ribono Shalom and says, but do understand, and that's what this Mizmar La'asaf is all about. Understand that if it wasn't for the Beis HaMikdash, if it wasn't for the fact that I poured out my anger, I took away the Beis HaMikdash, you wouldn't be here. You're that child. And therefore understand, if you will, Kiviyachol, the Beis HaMikdash made the ultimate sacrifice. I, Hashem, made the ultimate sacrifice in pulling myself away, taking out my anger on Eitz and Avanim, but realize that you are here because of that. And we're here, continuing, persevering, pushing forward, davening for the Geula Shlema, because of the Eitz and Avanim that Hashem took away from us, because of the loss of our mother. And perhaps to connect to that a little bit, understand that yes, we are missing, just like that child might not fully get what a mother is all about. But imagine how much richer his life would be, how much more complete, how much fuller it would be if he had his mother with him for those 13 years. And that's us as well. While life might seem right, might seem good, but we're missing something so fundamental. We're missing the Beis HaMikdash. We're missing that palpable sense of Shechina. And that's what we have to reflect upon. At least one day a year, to sit and really reflect on how life would be different if we had Mashiach, if we had Geula, if we had Shechina in such a real way. And perhaps if we can reflect on that concept, we can indeed connect to Tisha B'Av. And if we connect to Tisha B'Av properly, then maybe we will be Zocher that soon, that day of Tisha B'Av will indeed be converted to the Moed that will be us, HaMashiach. Amen.